It is September 14th, 1939, and in a secure chamber hidden beneath the pine forests south of Warsaw, Polish mathematician Marian Rejewski stands before what may well be the most dangerous machine in Europe. The device before him, a modest electrical apparatus with rotors, lamps, and switches arranged on a control panel, represents 7 years of meticulous intellectual labor. It is called the Cyclometer. Around him, officers of the Polish Cipher Bureau are burning files. The sound of German artillery grows louder by the hour. In 2 days, this machine will be destroyed. In 3 days, Warsaw will fall. What Rejewski is witnessing is not merely the end of Polish cryptographic research, but the erasure of evidence that Poland had achieved what Britain and France could not: the systematic decryption of German military communications. The cyclometer is about to vanish from history, a technological ghost that would remain largely unknown for decades. Yet it would fundamentally alter the outcome of the Second World War. The problem that created the need for the cyclometer was nothing less than the security architecture of Nazi Germany itself. By the early 1930s, the German military had adopted the Enigma cipher machine, a portable, rotor-based encryption device that scrambled messages with seemingly impossible complexity. The commercial version of Enigma had been available since the 1920s, used by banks and businesses across Europe, but the German military version was something else entirely. It possessed a plug board that added an additional layer of substitution, making the possible number of configurations not merely thousands or millions, but an almost incomprehensible 7.2 billion combinations. Each day, the machine's operator would be given new settings: the order of the rotors, the positions they started at, and the plugboard connections. These settings changed at midnight every single day. Without knowing the daily settings, an intercepted message was utterly useless. A single change in any setting would render all subsequent decryption attempts worthless. For the British and French, the Enigma seemed unbreakable. Their code-breaking efforts, relying on traditional linguistic analysis and statistical methods, made no headway whatsoever. The German government believed their system was impenetrable. In Berlin, military planners transmitted sensitive operational orders with complete confidence that no enemy could possibly understand them. This confidence was not mere arrogance, it was rooted in genuine cryptographic theory. A machine that offered such enormous variety, that changed its configuration every single day, seemed to defy all conventional attack. Poland, positioned uneasily between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, could not afford such optimism. Since the Polish-Soviet War of 1920, Polish intelligence had recognized that communications intelligence was as vital as any military weapon. When Polish mathematicians examined the Enigma problem in the early 1930s, they brought something entirely novel to the challenge. They approached it not as linguists or statistical analysts, but as pure mathematicians. Marian Rejewski, a graduate of Warsaw University, possessed an intuitive grasp of permutation theory and group mathematics. In December 1932, working from material supplied by French intelligence, intercepted German documents and a glimpse of the actual machine itself, Rejewski made a breakthrough that changed everything. He reconstructed the internal wiring of the Enigma rotors through pure mathematical insight. But knowing how the machine was built was only part of the puzzle. The real challenge was determining what the daily settings were. It was this challenge that gave birth to the cyclometer. Rejewski observed that the Germans, in their procedural protocols, were making a subtle but devastating mistake. Every day, they would establish a single starting position for all operators on a given communications network. Moreover, in their messages, operators would repeat the message key, the 3-letter setting they had chosen, not once, but twice in enciphered form. This repetition, this redundancy, created patterns. Rejewski called these patterns characteristics. If one could identify these characteristics for all possible rotor positions, one could create a catalog. With such a catalog, a radio operator could intercept a message, examine its characteristics, and with a simple lookup, identify the exact rotor configuration the Germans had used that day. The theoretical challenge was elegant. The practical challenge was staggering. To create such a catalog would require testing all possible Enigma configurations. With 3 rotors that could be arranged in 6 different orders, and each rotor capable of being placed in any of 26 positions, the total number of configurations was 105,456. To manually test even a fraction of these would require months of human labor. The device was, by modern standards, remarkably simple in concept. Imagine taking 2 complete Enigma machines, entire rotor assemblies with all their internal wiring, and coupling them together with an electrical circuit. The cyclometer consisted precisely of this: 2 sets of Enigma rotor systems mounted on a control panel. Around these rotors were arranged 26 small electrical lamps, each one labeled with a letter of the alphabet. A rheostat, essentially an electrical resistor that could be adjusted, controlled current flow through the system. A series of switches allowed an operator to alter the rotor positions. The rotors themselves were permanently fixed to a single position, the letter Z in each of the 3 rotor positions, giving the designation ZZZ. This meant the cyclometer did not need to be constantly reconfigured. An operator would simply move the 3 middle rotor dials to each of the 17,576 possible positions, observing at each step which of the 26 lamps illuminated. By carefully recording which lamps illuminated and how many times, an operator could identify the characteristic, the cycle structure, for that particular setting. Multiply this by 17,576 settings, across 6 possible rotor orders, and the result was a complete map of Enigma's cycle structure. This map became known as the Catalog of Characteristics, or, more informally, the card catalog. The manufacturing process was intricate. The AVA engineers had to ensure that the rotor wirings in the cyclometer precisely matched those of the German Enigma machines. Even a single incorrect wire connection would render the entire device useless. The assembly of the cyclometer and its associated equipment was carried out not in the main AVA facilities, but in a specially designated secure room at the Polish Cipher Bureau's headquarters. This room, known as Room 13, or the clock room, was accessible only to the most senior officials and a handful of trusted technicians. Among them was Antoni Paluth, one of AVA's directors, along with specialists in precision mechanics like Czesław Betlewski. The work was undertaken with absolute secrecy. Few people in Poland knew that such a device even existed. Fewer still understood what it could do. The cyclometer's operational value became apparent in early 1938. Colonel Stefan Mayer, the chief of Polish intelligence, directed his cryptographers to measure their success. Over a 2-week period, they compared the number of German messages they had successfully decrypted against the total number of German messages intercepted. The ratio was 75%. 75% of all German military radio communications, the most sensitive operational messages in the entire Reich, were being read by a small group of Polish mathematicians working in forests south of Warsaw. Rejewski himself noted that with slightly expanded personnel they might have achieved 90%. It was a staggering success. German generals were transmitting operational orders, intelligence summaries, and tactical directives, all of which were being read by Polish intelligence within hours of transmission. Neither the German High Command nor Berlin's political leadership had any inkling of this catastrophe. The cyclometer's advantage, however, proved temporary. In September 1938, the Germans changed their operating procedures. They discontinued the practice of using a single indicator setting for all operators on a network. Now, each operator would choose their own starting position. This change rendered the cyclometer's catalog useless. The method of characteristics that Rejewski had so brilliantly exploited no longer applied. But Rejewski was not defeated. He was inspired. He began working on an entirely different approach, one that would take the cyclometer's concept further. In October 1938, he conceived of a machine that would automate not just the catalog creation, but the actual search for daily keys. He called this machine the bomba cryptologiczna, the cryptological bomb, a name allegedly suggested by his colleague Jerzy Rojewski after the bomba, a dessert confection popular in Warsaw. The bomba was a far more complex device than the cyclometer. It consisted of 6 complete sets of Enigma rotors, all mechanically linked and driven by electric motors. When activated, the bomba would cycle through every possible rotor position automatically, testing each one against intercepted message characteristics. At the moment when a set of lamps illuminated in the exact pattern predicted by the mathematical theory, the machine would stop. The operator would then know they had found the day's settings. Each bomba took approximately 2 hours to find a solution. 6 bombas were built before September 1939, one for each of the then possible rotor orders. But by December 1938, the Germans had added 2 new rotors to the Enigma system, expanding the number of possible rotor orders from 6 to 60. The Polish Cipher Bureau lacked the resources to build 54 additional bomba machines. The Germans had, through this simple modification, rendered the Polish breakthrough insufficient to maintain decryption rates. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. It enables us to continue exploring these hidden chapters of history, the technological innovations that shaped our world, and the remarkable individuals who changed the course of human events. How did the Polish achievement compare with what the Germans themselves possessed, or with what the Allies were developing? The answer reveals an uncomfortable truth about the Second World War. The British and American cryptanalytic effort, which history has celebrated, was fundamentally dependent on Polish breakthroughs. The Enigma machine the British possessed before 1939 was merely a commercial model, useless for military cryptanalysis. When Alan Turing and his colleagues at Bletchley Park began their work in 1939, they possessed no special advantage. What gave them their advantage was Polish intelligence. In July 1939, knowing that German invasion was imminent, the Polish Cipher Bureau made a decision of staggering consequence. They invited British and French intelligence representatives to a secret meeting near Warsaw. There, in an act of extraordinary national sacrifice, Polish cryptographers revealed everything: their mathematical methods, their technical innovations, their working Enigma replicas, and the blueprints for both the cyclometer and the bomba. 2 Enigma doubles were transported to Britain. Rejewski's papers and diagrams were placed in the hands of Alan Turing. The Germans never learned that this transfer had occurred, but it was this transfer, more than any other single factor, that would allow the British to continue and expand Polish cryptanalytic work throughout the war. The cyclometer itself never saw operational use during the war. When German forces began their invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, Polish Cipher Bureau personnel faced an immediate decision. They could attempt to hide the equipment and hope it would not fall into German hands, or they could destroy it. They chose destruction. In the chaos of the Polish collapse, as the Wehrmacht advanced rapidly toward Warsaw and the Soviet Union invaded from the east, the cyclometer was dismantled and destroyed. All records of its operation were burned. The device that had decoded the most secret communications of the German Reich simply ceased to exist. German intelligence officers who subsequently captured Polish Cipher Bureau facilities found nothing. The secret of the cyclometer went to the grave. The impact of the cyclometer's legacy was profound, though almost entirely invisible. Bletchley Park's success in reading German Enigma traffic during the war, a success that arguably shortened the war by 2 to 3 years and prevented an untold number of casualties, rested entirely on the foundation that Polish cryptographers had laid. The Turing bomb, which the British built to continue cryptanalytic work, was designed differently from the Polish bomba. but both machines embodied the same mathematical insights. Those insights had originated with Rejewski and the cyclometer. Historians have estimated that ultra, the intelligence derived from reading German Enigma traffic, provided the Allies with an advantage equivalent to several additional divisions of combat troops. That advantage originated in a secret room in Warsaw where a modest electrical device with rotors and lamps had illuminated the Germans' most guarded secrets. The cyclometer also represented a conceptual revolution in cryptanalysis. Before Rejewski, code-breaking had been largely an art, dependent on linguistic intuition and pattern recognition. Rejewski transformed it into a science, grounded in pure mathematics and automated mechanical reasoning. The cyclometer was not merely a tool for solving Enigma, it was the prototype for an entirely new approach to cryptanalysis. In this sense, the cyclometer can be seen as a direct ancestor to the electronic computers that would emerge in the decades following the Second World War. Both the Colossus machines used at Bletchley Park and the later digital computers owed a conceptual debt to the idea of automating mathematical operations for the purpose of cryptanalysis. What survives of the cyclometer today exists only in documentation. The physical machines were destroyed. But in 2019, engineers at Cambridge University, Hal Evans and Tim Flack, working from Rejewski's original drawings that had been preserved in the British archives, constructed a working reconstruction of the cyclometer. The machine that emerged from their workshop confirmed, after more than 80 years, that Rejewski's design worked exactly as intended. Every component functioned as the Polish mathematician had envisioned it. The reconstruction now resides at the University of Cambridge, a living testimony to the ingenuity of a man who solved, through pure thought and mathematical insight, what had seemed to be unsolvable. You can also find records of the cyclometer and other Polish cryptanalytic devices at the Cipher Museum in Warsaw, where plaques and displays honor the mathematicians and engineers whose work saved untold millions of lives during humanity's darkest chapter. What must be emphasized is this: the cyclometer was not a weapon in any conventional sense. It fired no shots, launched no explosives, delivered no devastating impact in battle. It was pure intellect transformed into mechanical action. It was mathematics made tangible. Yet, in its quiet way, operating in a secret room in the forest south of Warsaw, the cyclometer changed the course of history. It demonstrated that an enemy's communications, believed to be impregnable, could be breached through logical thinking and engineering innovation. It showed that a small nation with limited resources could achieve something that the great powers of Europe could not. And it revealed a fundamental truth about modern warfare: that control of information is as decisive as control of territory, and that the mathematician can triumph where the general might fail. The story of the cyclometer is ultimately a story about human ingenuity in the face of impossible odds. Rejewski and his colleagues were working against an enemy that believed itself invulnerable, using methods that had never been attempted before, with technology that had to be created from scratch. They succeeded not through accident or luck, but through disciplined thinking, collaborative effort, and a willingness to approach problems from entirely novel angles. When the invasion came and the cyclometer was destroyed, that success seemed to vanish into history, but the knowledge could not be destroyed. The mathematical insights could not be burned. And so they endured, passed on to the British, adapted and refined, and ultimately used to preserve freedom itself. The cyclometer, hidden in a secret chamber, destroyed before it could ever be captured, proved that the most powerful weapon in a cryptanalyst's arsenal is not secrecy, but understanding. In the end, it was Rejewski and his machine that held the key, not to victory, but to the very possibility of victory in a war that would determine the fate of the world.